Hello, everyone. Welcome to YouTube Masterclass, Coursera, USC, Harvard, USC, Harvard, and Calarts. And it's a 4 unit class. We're talking about auteur, and auteur means author, or director as author, or director, writer as author overall of the film. In postmodernism, a lot of time it's hard to be author because there's such constructions made out of things that are all over the LexisNexis of research that you can actually see everything that's an image that's possible to be seen isn't necessarily the case, but that you could get pretty close just from how many variables there are movie to movie about what it's going to be about, even within an auteur perspective of what is going to motivate the direction of the film. And Quentin Tarantino's authorship, he builds to climaxes between shots, between the chapters, between shots, you have very close up, very far away, but patterned like a painting when it's at an establishing shot, and then a close up on something that's either the back of the head, like you see Marcellus Wallace's back of the head, and there's this whole Godard thing in My Life to Live where he's shooting behind the character and you never see their face in the whole opening scene. And so, but today we're going to finish the conversation we were having about Jackie Brown because there's a few more things to cover, and you can take this as a 4 unit course that you can get credit for as an elective or as a class that you take toward a degree if they've agreed to do that, which Coursera does say you can take it for film studies and get credit in film studies, but it's USC, Calarts, and Harvard. And you can find this course online under YouTube Masterclass, Coursera, Harvard, or you can go to my personal YouTube page that's connected somehow to these clips, and there's a file on there that goes through and shows all the master classes all the way dating back a couple of years ago when we started. And that this is year 3 is incredible. So here we go. And Jackie Brown, I didn't really understand how a lot of things didn't make sense between the ending, but that was what became the most brilliant part about it in a good way, because it was me that when they would replay it, I hadn't seen anything like that because I hadn't really studied the silent film era. And then there's also like Stage Fright and Rashomon, where you have the same story that takes place in 4 different ways in Rashomon, and it's the same story told 4 different ways, but it's the exact same thing, just done differently. Like the characters move slower in one image, and the characters move, faster in another. And like in when the woodcutter tells the story of Rashomon, he's like talking about how he was a klutz fighting this samurai who was kind of a klutz too. And you're like, earlier in the movie, they're noble, gallant, and then they're evil in one, and told by a ghost. And you're like, okay, so we saw the same 4 things 4 times, and it's all told from like the Stoic, Cynic, Epicurean, and Pythagoras angle, right? It's an old story. Like Cedar by a Willow Tree is one of the original stories of Rashomon, and In a Grove. And I think In a Grove is the one where it's like the ghost tells the story of the bad things that happen at the crossroads. Now, the point is that's what they're doing in Jackie Brown. But I was watching Jackie Brown before I had seen Rashomon, and there was a lot of criticism at the time that explained it to me, and now I understand why I didn't had to see it the second time, and then it was the third or fourth time we saw it, right around the time that Reservoir Dogs was finally going out of theaters, and that was all planned to happen that way, and that was how contracts were signed, and he always got a good deal because he always delivers good. He'd only done 2 other movies, Jackie Brown being the third. I'm sure he's done a number of movies where he may not have been credited for. You kind of have to make your ropes. But he probably doesn't want credit for those because he counts very singularly each movie almost like a Stanley Kubrick or a Robert Bresson type. And I think I don't really want to get into his offstage eccentricities because I don't know anything about that. That's all hearsay or gossip or anything. We don't do that. I think the technique that he uses is all we're really discussing, like what we love most about the technique and why we liked being fooled by the ending of Jackie Brown. And the thing is like, because then you're like, that would make a good idea for a movie, and then you find out there's these like occurrence at Owl Creek, like Brazil endings, and that he saved it for the end, but tells it four different times in a different way, is one of those run Lola run moments, like I was saying last time we were on Masterclass. And I think those endings are really tricky to pull off, and that's how you can tell he's doing all these time shifts on purposes, because now he's shifting the narrative to where it goes clip after clip into the next story of the same story that happens differently. Like, for instance, Bridget Fonda's killed in two different places at two different times at the ending. That's when you can first tell that it's really not being told the same way, but it's the same part of the movie. And you think, is it a different angle? And then you're like, no, they're moving faster in one, they're moving slower in the other. That's how you can tell there's a difference between the. And then, like, there's, different angles of the shots. Makes you wonder if they filmed it all in one area and then split it up into other movies. And I think it's cool the way he, gets these big scenes out of these studios and go for all studio. Because that way you can just build these malls that burn down. And I remember some things that were said about the mall culture and how it's like the end of the mall culture. Well, that may be, although the beginning when they're in the mall, they seem to be having a decent time. And there are some cues throughout the films that maybe they're not suffering in the mall. Maybe they just had a slight fire and put it out. And, I'm not saying the whole mall burned down or didn't. Because again, you get into that whole Kubrickian thing of having multiple versions of the same film. And I know that usually the director controls all of those multiple versions if he is the auteur and not just building a movie for someone else, but building a movie for an audience the way they would love to see it. But ultimately his own vision is what that is, and that is his creativity, his edge, and his absolute captivity of all looking at a film at once and saying, that's what I wish I was watching now. Jackie Brown does good for the African American advantage of it being a female African American protagonist. And I think that Pam Grier's always been a great actor, and it's good to redo her in the blaxploitation as now kind of this like pop star in and of herself, but that she's kind of just wants to go on one last Superfly, rob a bank, and then we'll get out of here. But that everything slows down, like even people will say, to a longer take in blaxploitation, and it really is true in some cases. Like Superfly, the long take. Sweetback goes from long take to montage back and forth. And Shaft uses pretty quick takes, but that Shaft is more Hollywood-esque, but they're all Hollywood if they're blaxploitation to an extent. And so now we have this sort of like way nicer view of the blaxploitation from a distance, saying this is the anesthetized version. And I'm not saying Jackie Brown is anesthetized, because then you see, all these people get shot, and then, there's really controversial subject matter all throughout it, like any Tarantino film. You know, and even then it compares to Superfly in that, but because it's a new film, which Tarantino solves this problem with Grindhouse, where it's a bump and grind, it looks like it's an old exploitation film even more so. That's the only thing I'm talking about, is how, like in Jackie Brown, there are versions that are of the torn up film stock, and the film stock runs through. But I don't think that Jackie Brown slick look is anything bad, because then you redo an exploitation film onto like a Criterion version. I've done Sweetback like that, and you can see that it does actually like scope it out and make it look like a film stock coming down like a painting. So we're not knocking it, we're just comparing like what looks like a movie from when it's trying to be that movie from then, Or is it trying to be upgraded to the now in the way that the digital overlay makes the shot look clearer? And then you think, well, that's all focus anyway, so then they're going to pull the focus however they want. I think it's interesting how Tarantino has his own style. That style in Jackie Brown is shown all throughout the film in, again, these establishing shots that are kind of traded for closer up, and then even images of like a very close up. Like one scene you can moderate with is the scene in Reservoir Dogs where there's those cops in the bathroom with those canine unit dogs, and they're about to let him go on that guy, and it's like got this whole Samuel Fuller sense, and you're looking at this wide angle of the underground like bathroom or whatever it is, and there's this conversation going on. It's real tinny, and so you kind of get the whole thing pulled together in this one story of like the metaphor of what the whole movie is about. And then it's like in a few minutes, but like you've already seen half the movie, now you see the other half, and now you can put them together with this. It seems that if you look close enough at these things, they all fit in the way that they're supposed to tell the story. Even in Jackie Brown, when the four stories are told different of the same story, they all come from the root expert that one of these things must have happened, and if not, we really are in a run though to run world of sci-fi where we can, you know, edge of tomorrow. We're gonna fly back in time and experience that day till we kill the bug bladder beast. No, I'm kidding. But we got this thing here, and we found some Blu-rays. Unfortunately, my Pulp Fiction's never recovered, but we don't need to talk about that. I was going to get some more of those out. And this is coming after Jackie Brown. We're almost wrapped up with Jackie Brown. I just wanted to say that more to do with the acting, the genre, the fulfillment of today's time with all the entertainment of the past, the nostalgia of the past, and all of Tarantino's mighty hand over the whole thing, commanding sets that look like malls and offices and homes, domestic, like in Kill Bill. It all starts out with Jada Pinkett Smith in this house, and she's, or wait, we better look at this. Sorry, I almost had to shut this off. I'm looking at Kill Bill Volume 1, and it must be in Kill Bill Volume 2. And I want to get the right name here, but, well, I'm going to have to look up the cast of Kill Bill, if you can bear with me, everyone, because we're not, this one on the cover was for the Blu-ray, and I don't think we can do this. Here we go. Cast of, because we need this anyway for the next part of our conversation, so bear with me, class. Here we go. Okay, so it's Uma Thurman, David Carradine, Daryl Hannah, Michael Madsen, Lucy Liu, Vivica A. Fox, right? And Julie Dreyfus, Chiaki Kiriyama, Sonny Chiba, and there's a lot more. And so, and I didn't quite see that on here, and I apologize for being off a little bit there, but transitioning between Jackie Brown and Kill Bill is kind of an interesting thing in and of itself, because after that whole run with the first three movies, it was only really from 97 to 2001 or 2000 that the next movie didn't come out. But so much happened between then, in those years, those compressed years towards the end of a millennia. That so much happened in everybody's life between then and there that it was like a new identity was coming out for Tarantino and with Kill Bill. And so he brings this whole production together with Jackie Brown, and it's only 3 years later. So that means they probably already started Kill Bill years before. And that means that book that Rum Punch, that Kill Bill was based on and Pulp Fiction was based on, and to a degree Reservoir Dogs, is the same story universe that Elmore Leonard and Quentin Tarantino have been talking about forever and like have collaborated on others. levels. But there's this thing with the domesticity of Jackie Brown, where the domesticity is destroyed in and of itself because there's a gun battle or there's, a Superfly reference where she's trying to sleep or smoke a joint, somebody's shooting at her, it's like, and Samuel Jackson's commanding, but the fact is she commands everybody in the film, and that she's never disenfranchised in the film is pretty cool. There are times she gets her weed stolen from her, and that's really a tragic part of the movie. I don't know how she deals with that. Like, ultimately, just think, I mean, the DVD I had of Jackie Brown got stolen during the making of this uh, Masterclass, so that just makes it all the better to say, well, if you didn't see it now, because Sigma knew or somebody will have to come borrow it to keep it from getting stolen. No. So, Kill Bill, Volume 1, is where Uma Thurman is a swordsman of all things and a ninja, and she rides a motorcycle. And the whole campaign for the first one was that it was his fourth movie. And he had done a bunch of other scripts. We had talked about Dusk Till Dawn and Natural Born Killers and True Romance were all his scripts. And then you finally get to Kill Bill, and it's like still the rum punch story, but now it's told totally from another angle. And while there's connections between all the movies, it's like I said, they start to leave these sort of metaphors throughout each film. And that Sonny Chiba's in these is a real excellent way of saying that thank you to the type of cinema that we're making. Like, it's this kind of Asian, Chinese, or Japanese, even Japanese samurai Chinese, like ninja film, flying ninjas. It's everything he got into with Chungking Express with Wong Kar Wai, and then you see how he makes these realistic scenes out of his cast in these, and then you suddenly see the movie and you think back to like Michael Madsen speaking at his trailer, and she's like, she will have her revenge, you know, and you think of like when that's in volume 2, but it's also in volume 1. That's the one scene, and well, there's a couple of other shots that are in the other movies too, because at the end of Kill Bill Part 1, it does this montage of things that were seen and things to come in Kill Bill 2. And I think we can all see the opening too, where she somehow gets trapped in this hospital and all things are going awry, and then somehow she pulls herself back together and gets into the vehicle and kicks everyone ass. And she keeps coming so close to death all throughout this. It's like she's been through maybe 5 deaths all in the first one alone, and then she dies as many times as she has to kill someone. But if that were true, she'd have died 400 times, because doesn't she kill the 299 or the 399? That was like these ninjas in part 1 that are in the Lucy Liu segment. And Uma Thurman has to sword fight like 400 ninjas or 40 ninjas. I should have seen which one it was, but there were a lot of ninjas in there. It seemed like there was more than 40. It was the 99, the flying 99, and it was acrobatically done and stunt doubles and everything, but that they had to learn the real skill of sword fighting was totally amazing, I thought, about that movie, that they just amped it up with realistic sword fighting. So she has this list, the Kill Bill's Uma Thurman. She has this list of, first of all, she never gives her name away until the very end. And I'm going to let you see it to find out, because it's like one of those Rosebud type things where you're going to be like, what? Okay, she just gave her name out, and we totally didn't see that coming. And it was only once in the film. Otherwise, it beeps over it. And there's some names like that in Jackie Brown, where the tone skips over the name of the voice, and it's kind of an old in like Flint trick. But So she has this list of people she has to kill because they all nearly kill her and kill her child, and they actually take her child and raise it. David Carradine is Bill, and at her wedding, which is all told out of sequence and not seen until towards the middle of Volume One, and then parts of it are seen in Volume Two. The way they connect, it's like some of the scenes from Volume One will be connecting only in Volume Two. And so you see part one, a scene from it at the wedding, and then you see the scene before that in the next one, and you never know where all the scenes will pop up, but that they're all in that order, this really beautiful order. And it seems scattershot, which I love those kind of films, like those Altman like ones. But this one is like these whole big sequences played chapter to chapter, and they'll all be The Terrible Wedding Part 2. And what reminds me of The Terrible Wedding is Louis Fouillard's The Terrible Wedding and Le Vampire in 1915. And I just think it's another one of those weddings gone wrong. The Bloody Wedding is even a movie, I mean, Blood Wedding. And it's different stories told all out of sequence. Blood Wedding by Carlos Sora. So you see, these are like the Kill Bill Volume 1 report is we've got the Lucy Liu sequence, which has some animation in it. It has her chopping off dudes' heads, and it's done in this explosive way. It's not really funny. It's more like, ooh, that's horrible. It's so horrific that you can't take your eyes off of it. And that these women that are in this Fox Force 5 type group, that's not what it's called, but they're in this they're Bill's army or whatever, he's got these five women hired Michael Madsen. So he's one of the people she's trying to kill. Vivek, aka Fox, gets killed at the beginning of Volume 1. It was that name. And then in part 2, no, in part 3, it's Michael Madsen, and then there's Daryl Hannah, and then there's Bill, and then there's Lucy Liu. And Bill is David Carradine, and she's got to kill all of them. So it gets, like, if you're not following the plot, at least this one will help you understand why it's not really convoluted. It's really labyrinthian in its score, because it goes in and out of this whole, like, discussion of one thing. Water your brains on that, you see it in a different order. These movies really are masterpieces that we're talking about here because of the way they interlock, the intertextual differences between narrative and where you place the next event, because you can break it up like a novel in different order to tell the story, which is still hard to do even in a novel, let alone a screenplay that then later you're going to shoot out of sequence anyway, because most movies are. But that's not the point, to have all that work for all these different sequences, let alone scenes, let alone flashbacks or recoils back. But why does it always feel, Tarantino, in a good way, that we're always in the present even though we're flashing back and forward? We always feel like we're in the present anyway because we're watching a movie at the point it is at that time. And I don't think any other director can do that. Can make it, just because otherwise it feels like a flashback or a jump cut. But in the Tarantino, it's like we're reading it here, this story. Suddenly we're on an earlier story, like even like comic book world that it is, but that it's so realistic because we experience our memory in different order of how it happened, even when we experience these films and experience back to them. So it's really trippy when you're watching a Tarantino film and all of a sudden you're like having deja vu about something that didn't even play yet. And that was the weird thing about how it sets it up and then goes back and forth between those actions and standard of acting that's real, that keeps it real. So originally what happens earlier in the story, and you see this in part 1 and 2, is that Bill trains Uma Thurman to be this ninja, samurai, swordswoman. and she kicks ass. She recovers from her crash, or when they shot her at the wedding. This is after she's trained in Machu Picchu and learned from Bill how to be a ninja of the highest order, That later she has to buy a sword from Sonny Chiba in part two is cool, but we'll get to that in a minute. But I think that when she goes back to kill everybody and she's killing out of order, it's hard to remember 1 through 5 what it was, but we all know that when she gets to Michael Madsen's house, and it's in part two, he shoots her with buckshot, and they bury her, and that's another one of those times that she dies. But she wakes up, lights her lighter, and punches her way out of the ground, and she comes up. That's another. She almost dies, and that's another one of those Fouillard moments where like she almost gets trapped and killed, and then she escapes, almost like those old Batman shows, like from the '60s and '70s, where they come near death and then they escape. I mean, it's like that's the most exciting way to tell a story. And then in the Lucy Liu sequence, and Vivica A. Fox sequence in part one, there's a lot of near death occurrences. Even when Daryl Hannah comes out at the hospital to end it for Uma Thurman, his character, like all hell keeps breaking loose in different orders throughout the movie, but she escapes the Daryl Hannah character because she's able to get someone to help her, and it's really amazing to watch her kind of recover from these things. It kind of makes her the Ubermensch of the whole movie, and that she defeats Bill, whether or not we'll get to that later. But I don't want to just give away the spoiler before I've told more of how this all works together. So she gets placed in this club with these 5 murderer hitmen, all action ninja types that have learned from Bill how to be the best they can be as gangsters, and they're really sharp gangsters. That Uma Thurman's character has to go after all of them and kill them all, and kill David Carradine is because they almost kill her at a wedding. Now I know I've explained that, but I'm trying to make it understood that that's kind of where it's going now. And so then she, one by one, she does actually just barely, and not without nearly dying and almost dying several times, take everybody down. And she does that in the domestic setting with Vivek A. Fox. And that just means there's like tables and chairs like you would have a real house set up, and if for the whole set, and those are hard to do because it's hard to imitate the inside of a house without building that house just to destroy it, but they're good at that. Tarantino and Hollywood and all that. And I was going to tell you guys, when we come to Grindhouse, we're going to talk more about, we'll have a couple of lectures on that one, because we will talk about Planet Terror and how that is interesting in the world of Robert Rodriguez, and what we like about Robert Rodriguez too. So just keep that in mind, that we will go over Grindhouse, and I'll somehow get the story back on the screen monitor. But no, I wasn't looking at the text there. I was looking at these casting, and I could show you what's on the screen right now, because you never get to see the screen. But it's interesting how there, I think we can see it better from up there. See, I just had this around, and this is kind of one of those cool sights. I don't know if you could even see that. I don't know if it was a very good shot. I couldn't tell. I'm just winging it. No, I'm kidding. I'm not really winging it. I was actually approved to teach this class as a professor. And I was approved to teach all these classes as a professor on Masterclass. And we take seriously the other people that teach these master classes, and we know that they're not on a whim or out on a limb, because they're really, really professional at what they do. And I'm kind of at the bottom of that stack, but please believe me, we're all like required to be approved for this class. So I was just kind of joking when I said, I've never done this before or whatever. So What else do we know about Kill Bill? Well, we know that Bill, the David Carradine character, is like just like his Shogun Old West characters, where he was this larger than life, like kind of scary villain, like can kill anybody, can get anything done, can do what he wants, can be anything he wants, and he can go anywhere he wants, and he can do anything he wants. So he's a villain, but he also is omniscient and omnipotent, and he always hears everything you say, and you're always very careful around him, and he muscles his way in to tell these women what to do. And it's really interesting because they end up being just as strong, if not stronger, than him. And I think that he, being the ringleader of the gang, makes him the strongest, but that she's coming after his men and him and winning the battle each time, but barely winning, makes you wonder if she's going to actually get, makes you kind of think she's going to get killed before she gets there to the end of the final threshold guardian, which is David Carradine, and that she saves him for last, kind of makes you think she is going to win. Because she had it all set up to exactly that she had it written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and how they would fall, and we have to all piece that back together. And that I am unprepared for because I can't remember if part 2 comes first or if it was part 5 second. Or, you know, I thought that the very last. I know I'm getting booed for that, but I don't remember if the Lucy Lou sequence was chapter 5 or they put it all in different sequence and they played it all in different order. And then you think about the Lucy Lou sequence where she's young to old to older, not older but like younger woman, and she starts off in this anime cartoon and everything builds to this frenzy of her sword battling Uma Thurman's character, and they're in this like wintry like Mizoguchi set like Ugetsu or something, and there's this you hear this water flip flopping back, and it's like back to that training she had from another actor that I had named that I don't know if I have on here. It wasn't Sonny Chiba, but I don't have it right away. But there's this Asian actor that also trains her and teaches her how to use a sword at Machu Picchu, and he's a personal friend of Bill David Carradine's character. And that was the one also that trained her. And that's where they keep talking about Machu Picchu. And that's a place in South America, like near Mexico, like Mazatlan. And it's like where there's so many steps, you can see the whole world from the top of the. You can see everywhere in the world from the top of this, like, staircase. And they keep talking about that during the film. There's also the five finger death punch factor, which is discussed early on in Volume 1 or maybe, or no, early on in Volume 2. Sorry. And David Carradine talks about how there's this move you can make as a ninja, where if you hit someone 5 times at the exact point in the chest, they'll take 5 steps and then they'll die. Their heart will explode and then they'll die. And I'm like, okay, well, that was a weird scene to pop in there, but later in the film it's used on him by, spoiler alert, Uma Thurman. She uses a five finger death punch, and that's how she finishes Bill. Ironic that he taught it to her earlier in that film. I can't believe that. That's the ultimate irony. He taught her that move, but it was actually Taipei or whatever that guy's name was. I don't remember. He was also a lot of the what was it? The guys that were in this film, they were trained by the same choreographer that did the Matrix and everything, and they did the same choreography as, like, you know, not just that the movies that have that 360-degree rotunda of shooting, where the film stock or the digital is being captured every image around in a circle, and they actually have ways to do that now with one camera, but you can definitely do it with 360 cameras, each one a degree different, you know, and then you're kind of like, whoa. And so the guy that would like stunt train these guys, and I think it's Chewie and Poe, but I don't remember. And he like choreographs these big battles, and he's the choreographer here. Again, it's in these credits, but these names and these vast credits, and plus, I'm pretty blind. Like I watched movies my whole life and went blind. No, I'm kidding. I'm fine. I just can't really see in this light. Yeah. So a lot of these names that are on the movie, we know for a fact that, I mean, obviously the actors are like some of the biggest actors you can get. But what I'm trying to get at is have the biggest production team. That the production company, since Reservoir Dogs Band Apart was their original, was Tarantino and Rodriguez and Lawrence Bender's original company that they had together. And Band Apart would later sign with Miramax, which was owned by Disney at the time. And so that was all around the time Reservoir Dogs came out. And they're using the same studio as Miramax. And Miramax is allowing them as kind of this independent studio to go do the set to set thing. And they're really doing a great job going set to set and finding the venues they're looking for. I didn't really keep track of if whether Lawrence Bender stopped being a part of Band Apart or if he left Miramax. I should look that up someday, but I didn't really like producers. Not with the person. Usually, once producers work with you, you work for them forever anyway. Not in a bad way. It's just the way it is. But Tarantino, he really puts across the images the way he wants to do it for himself. And it's not just the out of sequence thing that's unique to him, it's also his visual design and all of the captivating things you see in his movie and the adventurous spirit of everywhere you go, something big's going to happen. Like, no matter where you're at and where you go, like, something huge and dynamic is about to happen. I mean, you can't go around the block without being bombasted by like a rocket launcher, even though that's a metaphor for what didn't go into the movie. And that's not a flaw with that movie because it it just springs to that height at that point. It was just the extra turbine that they had blowing on that thing. And I think that in Kill Bill, it's really interesting how everything builds to a freaking frenzy in the first one. And she ends up sword battling with Lucy Liu, and then they have the sword battle, sword battle, sword battle. They both like almost demolish each other again in another battle, and so finally Uma Thurman's character wins the battle, and it's totally epic, totally wild. And it's totally done in sort of like this gory, samurai film kind of way. Like this, like at the end of that episode, it's kind of done in this like we're ninjas and we're Sonny Chiba movies. Sonny Chiba, like for instance, would show this scene in Return of Street Fighter or whatever, where this guy gets punched in the head, and then you see an X-ray, and then he pukes everywhere, and then like they make it look like it was a real punch, and that's what I'm saying is in movies they try to make it look real. I mean, and Tarantino always makes it look real. But one thing that's weird about it is he aestheticizes, like uses montage or mise en scène at the command of a powerhouse, and aestheticizes everything about the movie, like not aestheticize, like makes it artistic, like shows it in a flashy way. And he's not showing off, it's like he shows it in the way it should be shown, like through the lens of something climactic happening is always the image itself experimenting with how it conveys it in these films. You see. And so, why I told you that Uma Thurman's character kills Bill at the end is because you keep thinking throughout the movie, even if you know that the way it's set up, is you still don't think she's going to make it because she's against all odds. And now, we had talked a little bit about the female melodrama and how there's this woman at odds with the world. Well, Jackie Brown, she's at odds with the world just for being a woman and African American, but that Jackie Brown actually meets her goals and satisfies her needs and doesn't get doesn't really ever get disenfranchised. Well, one of the things we learned from that in Kill Bill is that, like, the character of Uma Thurman's character, she doesn't really get compromised, except a few times she almost dies. So really, she gets like pretty close to compromised. And then in the hospital, she's almost like the Trojan woman. She's already been stolen by like all these different dudes in the hospital. And I'm like, well, this is getting raunchy because now she's waking up and she's getting good. And then she's like even more powerful because she overcomes the compromise and takes them all. And it's one of those that which don't kill me makes me stronger kind of plot lines that really sinks it in. So it just doesn't really ever get tiresome to watch a film like this. I mean, you could put it on at any time of day, any time of night. Put this film on in the background, even, and you're good to go. You could just absorb it, clear your mind with it. I mean, there's a meditational scenes, like with the scene with David Carradine and Uma Thurman by the fire, or like with the drunken master of the hill of Machu Picchu, And some of it seems like this funny kind of broken blossoms, like, look at like the Asian style, but like Wong Kar-wai ultimately would have had to have approved because he was still selling Chungking Express through Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs Band Apart. It was a different version of that, Miramax. It was this other company that they had, and I don't remember the name of that company, Chungking Express Films or something, And in Kill Bill, you can never guess what's going to happen the first time you see it. Usually, by the second time you see it, it's still hard to say what's going to happen even if you've seen it, because when these came out, you're seeing Kill Bill Volume 1, and you see it all the way through, and you really enjoy it, and you're like, that was a good film. I'm going to see it again, but you really want to see the second one. And you don't know how long it's going to take to come out. They kind of count as one movie because number 9 is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And when we get to number 9, and Hateful Eight is number 8, we'll realize that this counts as part 4. Both of them. And we'll do that again in a little while, because then we have Hateful Eight, Django Unchained, and Glorious Bastards to go. And then we'll do some compare and contrast, but actually we'll do our compare and contrast when we get to this one, which totally blows my mind that it's a Tarantino Rodriguez actual double feature. But that this is kind of a double feature, but came out in 2 different parts, wasn't just because they were planning it all as one movie. Which there's no shame in that, because they were planning the first 3 all as one movie. And then it became all these individual like episodes in each film that are somewhat connected but still have a distinct style to them. Like the really black and white looking, even in color, of Reservoir Dogs is really kind of a gangster throwback to the classical era. The suits and the guys with suits, they're all. And Pulp Fiction has this really sort of calamity in LA, post-apocalyptic LA feel to it that really rings true to it. But it's not totally post-apocalyptic, but everyone knows LA really is post-apocalyptic by the time of Pulp Fiction. I don't mean in a sci-fi sense, I mean in a gangster. This underworld has gotten like France bad. And that's why they're even discussing France. No, and I'm not saying bad in a bad cinema kind of way, because we would never say anything about that to these movies. These movies are freaking great. So far, you get to Jackie Brown, and there's kind of this domestic melodrama, but blaxploitation theme going over it. And then with Kill Bill, it's like this Wong Kar Wai, Ho Xiaoshin sentiment. And then you kind of have the flying ninja battles, like Touch of Zen by King Hugh. And really, that's where all of these swordsman stories came from. But that she has to seek revenge and will have her revenge, as they say. Well, she tears Daryl Hannah's eye out and um, throws a knife through Vivica A. Fox after taking a knife and dies again and comes back to life. It's a good thing. She's like Super Mario. She just keeps getting extra lives somewhere. In Machu Picchu, she found, if you ran to the top of that and saw the whole world, you probably would get some extra lives. You just run back up it again and fight, reconnect with your body. Yeah. I think the subtitles in the scene with Sonny Chiba are so classic because in Volume 2, because they have this kind of, and we'll talk more about this next time too, because we only have 4 more minutes, but I'm sure you're all cheering because I kind of lingered on about the same thing, but I didn't though, because it's worth it, because there's a point to it, because it's like everybody loves these movies because they're action films. Like all of them are action films, from going back to Reservoir Dogs. They're cross genre, they each have their own simplicity on a genre style, but they each have their own explicitity because they emerge from these genres and build something really big. Not really exaggerated because it's realistic looking, that it could happen that way, that events have skyrocketed, have escalated to that point, and like Pulp Fiction and the other movies, that the escalation really leads to the shooting and the madness. And this is how the action film Scarface always is, with shooting and madness, and it's escalating as it moves on. Kind of like a trauma film, madness, and it escalates as it moves on. With these kind of violent and sexual and high end movies of that type of exploitation are ridged across, then finally you come to the Kill Bill, and there's sort of this really high art sense of like everything, even that Michael Madsen's in his trailer way out in the wilderness. There's some high tech sense about that. Way they film it and the way he's out there. I mean, it can't be easy to live out in the middle of nowhere if you're a needed assassin on all occasions. And that he's hiding out from the Uma Thurman character. You're like, whoa. You're like, he's knows she's coming, but he doesn't know when. He's gonna be ready at all times, And you're like, man, this chick's taking down her own club, and she has reason to. So that she does the 5-finger death punch on, and Daryl Hannah kills Michael Madsen. By the way, she slices him with a sword, and that's right before she loses her eye. It's quite a skirmish in the pickup trailer that's out in the middle of the desert, and yeah, there's some, like when he shoots her with the buckshot, it's like with a shotgun, but it's kind of like machine. But I don't understand how uh, when she takes the buckshot, I don't understand how that didn't kill her at the same pressure that a shotgun would have. But maybe he had that tilted just so it wouldn't. And I don't know. Stranger things have happened. I'm not really sure. I love these movies not just because they're out of sequence or like have these intricate ways of defining like a violent sexual image through, and mostly just like a violent action film type movie through like the Brian De Palma technique of the making the violence really aesthetic, like having a montage or really focus in. It's like that scene in Pulp Fiction where it keeps focusing in or on what's going on and then comes back to present moment. And you're like, whoa, it's like a roller coaster ride. We're so entertained, but it's all because the art is presented in a way that's not very subversive, but is in fact against the grain of how most movies are made. It's out of sequence. It's some of it seems out of context in a good way, because then you don't know how to match up the pieces right away, like Citizen Kane, and the pieces are the different scenes. So But anyways, my friends, we'll get back to you in a few days, whatever it may be. Keep having a good one out there. We'll get back to that was lecture number 5, and in a few days we'll do lecture number 6. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll talk to you later. That was mostly about Kill Bill. All right, here we go.